Under the heavy heat of a late summer afternoon, a lone cowboy rode into the small frontier town of Red Hollow, his hat tilted low against the glare of the sun and his horse moving at an easy steady gait. No one in town paid him much attention, for he looked like any other drifter who came and went with the seasons. His boots were dusty, his shirt worn and faded, and his eyes shadowed under the brim of his hat, the kind of man who carried his history in silence and did not invite questions. He tied his horse outside the general store and stepped inside, where the air was cooler and smelled faintly of flour, coffee and leather. The shopkeeper barely glanced at him as he moved to the counter, asking in a low voice for a bag of feed and a few supplies. The cowboy paid in cash, pulling a worn billfold from his pocket, the bills folded neatly and without flourish. Then he stepped back into the sunlight and paused, letting his gaze drift down the street to where the saloon doors swung lazily in the breeze. He walked there without hurry, his spurs clicking softly against the dusty boards outside. A few men leaned on the rail, watching him with idle curiosity. He looked like any other stranger who might be passing through, with no claim to anything and no reason to stay inside the saloon. The air was thick with the scent of whiskey and tobacco. A piano played off-key in the corner, and a few card games were scattered around the tables. He moved to the bar, ordered a drink, and kept to himself, sipping slowly while he listened to the hum of voices around him. It was then she walked in, her dress plain but neat, her hair pulled back with a ribbon, her eyes quick and searching as if she had come for someone or something. She glanced over the room and her gaze settled briefly on the cowboy. He did not look away. She moved to the counter and spoke to the bartender, her voice carrying enough for him to catch that she was asking about work. He could tell from the way she stood that she was determined, yet worn down by the kind of life that demanded every ounce of strength she had. She glanced at him again, perhaps sensing his steady watchfulness, and he tipped his hat in silent greeting. She gave the faintest nod before turning back to the bartender, who shook his head at whatever she had asked. She left soon after, walking out into the sun and disappearing up the street. The cowboy stayed where he was, finishing his drink and leaving a silver coin on the bar. When he stepped back outside, the street was quieter and the sky was sliding toward the gold of evening. He made his way to the livery where his horse waited, and from there he rode out toward the edge of town. His land stretched far beyond the horizon, though no one here knew it. Miles of pasture, rivers and hills dotted with cattle and wild horses, deeds and titles locked away in a safe back in the big house that sat at the heart of his spread. For years he had lived alone, letting his foreman handle most of the work while he kept his distance from the world. Since the day he had lost the woman he once loved, he had sworn he would not let another close. The ache had hardened into something he wore like armor, and he preferred that people think of him as nothing more than a quiet drifter. When he reached his ranch, the sun was sinking and the air cooling with the promise of night. He unsaddled his horse and rubbed him down before heading inside. The big house felt empty as always, its high ceilings and wide halls echoing with a silence that had become too familiar. He cooked a simple meal and ate by the window, watching the stars emerge one by one. The next day he rode back into town on some pretense of buying supplies, though in truth he found himself thinking of the woman from the saloon. He saw her again near the small schoolhouse, speaking with a group of children. Her face softened when she smiled, and he felt something stir in him that he had not felt in years. He learned her name from the storekeeper, Anna, and that she had come from another county seeking work after her father had passed, leaving debts behind. She had no idea he owned half the land surrounding Red Hollow, and he saw no reason to tell her not yet. Days passed and he found more reasons to ride into town, sometimes offering to help with small repairs at the schoolhouse or carrying supplies she could not manage alone. She was wary at first, unused to kindness without a price, but slowly she began to trust him. They talked more each time, never about himself and always about small things, until one evening when the sky was painted in shades of fire and rose, she asked where he came from. He told her only that he had been many places and seen more than most. She did not press him. Instead, she invited him to join her for supper at the small room she she rented above the bakery. They ate simply bread, stew and coffee, yet the warmth of her presence lingered with him long after he left. Weeks turned into months and the town began to see them together, though no one guessed the truth about who he was. Then came the day when a group of men arrived looking to buy land for a rail line. They were loud in the saloon, boasting about how they would force the current owners to sell cheap and profit from it. He listened quietly from the corner until one mentioned her schoolhouse would have to go. Something in him snapped. He stood, walked to their table and laid down a set of documents, the deeds to the surrounding land. Their laughter died when they saw the signatures, the names that matched county records, the realization spreading that the man they thought a drifter was the very one who could end their plans with a single word. He told them the rail would go nowhere near the schoolhouse and that they would be wise to leave town. The men did not argue. When he left the saloon, Anna was waiting outside. She had heard enough to know the truth. She looked at him with wide eyes, 1,000 questions in them. He removed his hat and met her gaze, telling her quietly that he had never meant to deceive her but had wanted to be sure of her heart. She stepped closer, her hand resting lightly against his chest, saying she had only ever cared for the man he was, not for the land or the titles. Something in him broke then, the wall he had built around himself crumbling under the weight of her words. He drew her into his arms, the setting sun casting them in gold, and for the first time in years he felt the quiet steady beat of hope in his heart, and he knew he would not let it go again.